Fantastic. So this forest that you see here on this giant screen, thank you to the Denver Botanical Gardens for this beautiful facility. Oh my God, this is incredible to be up here talking in front of a movie screen. I mean, this is awesome. So, okay, this picture, I pulled a bunch of pictures from the internet. We have pictures that we're going to go through, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one and what makes each one great. This is from the Michigan All-State Bonsai Exhibition in 2007. I don't know the artist, but I thought that this is a really great example of a Shimpaku juniper forest planted on a slab and using a technique where you use moss and sphagnum moss underneath this moss to hold the soil together and keep the soil from washing away when you're watering the tree. So we're going to go more into this. So what is a forest planting? A forest planting is something that consists of more than one trunk. Typically it's 2 or more trunks, and forests are typically multiple trunks and sometimes hundreds of trunks. So what do you do with all these trunks? Well, it helps to place the trunks in different ways to make the planting look like a miniature version of a large forest. And generally you want all the normal processes involved in bonsai, which is growing a tree in a container, having that horticultural mastery, and keeping a tree thriving in a container. Wiring applies to forest plantings, as does bonsai soil, the principles of drainage, and a lot of the species that we use in bonsai, you can adapt to forest plantings in bonsai. Twin and triple trunk plantings generally not thought of as forests, but they can be, and I think it depends on the shape of the tree. And the emphasis is placed on the trees, right? So the containers are part of a forest planting. We can really build the illusion of age and build the composition. This forest is from Bill Valvanis, and Bill used beech. I think this is an American beech, if I'm not mistaken. And notice how the container of the tree complements the trunks, and the fall color of the tree really pops in the autumn. Generally for forests we're using shallow unglazed trays, and we're creating the illusion of a landscape of trees. We're not just showcasing a single tree, although some forests are a single tree, and we're going to talk more about that. Wide, low containers provide the artist with the canvas for the forest. But every rule is made to be broken. As you can see here in the forest on this table, that's not a wide or a low, necessarily a low container. So, you know, if you have the right tree, it's okay to break some of the rules. Any material can be used in the preparation of a forest. And mixed forests are also sometimes fun to do, but it's tougher. I've done mixed forests with spruces and Doug firs, and I was able to keep the tree alive for a couple of years, but eventually one of the trees died off and the other tree was still living, because spruces and Douglas firs have different requirements for health and vigor. So you can try mixed forests. They are fun. I encourage people to work with mixed forests, but they're sort of the anomaly in terms of forest plantings and forest bonsai. The material doesn't need to be perfect bonsai proportions. In fact, some of the best forests are made with trees that you wouldn't necessarily think could be good bonsai, but when you put them together and take the emphasis away from just the singular tree, you can make a really great impactful forest using material that most bonsai practitioners would maybe walk right past and not even consider. So the forest on the right side of the table, on your left side of the table, it is a perfect example of that. It doesn't use really high quality material. It uses Siberian elm, which is classified as an invasive species in Colorado. But it's a really tough species. It grows in places that that no other trees really grow. So Siberian elm was like, I had these little stems of Siberian elm, and I thought, well, I guess I can grow them into a forest, and I have done that over a few years. We'll talk a little bit more about that tree later. Here you see my sensei and Ryan Neal, who is the sensei of a lot of folks in here. This pygmy cypress forest is a great example of using trees that maybe you don't think of as bonsai in a singular tree environment where the focus is on just one of the trees, and then grouping them together, and also using topography in the container and in the planting itself to really give the trees extra height and extra topography, and really set that landscape, set that mood of the mountainside with a forest of trees growing on it. This tree in person is spectacular to look at. It towers above you simply because of the height of the stone that's inside of the container. So this tree is really, if you can get a chance to go out and visit Ryan out at Bonsai Mirai in Oregon, you'll see this tree, and it's one of his treasured group plantings or forest plantings. And this thing, literally, you need two people to pick this thing up. So you can't just pick it up with one person. It's a big composition. Here's another forest. So this is a Japanese maple forest. And I think one of the reasons I put it in here in my presentation is because this is an example of a forest where not all the trunks are straight up and down, and you get some of the trunks that are bending outwards at the periphery of the forest. Has some nice negative space in there, and I think we can also mention that you can see straight through the trunks in this view, and that's sort of this technique that I like to call like a trail through the forest, or a gap in the trees where you see straight through the other side, and it kind of looks like maybe it's a hiking path or something through that landscape. It's a great way, doing that technique is a great way to add negative space to your composition, which is highly prized in bonsai, is adding negative space to your foliar masses and to your trunk and trunk lines. And it helps to set the scene of a forest or a group in miniature, and it helps to distort your sense of scale when you're looking at it. So this is Masahiko Kimura's forest. He is the sensei of my sensei. He is who Ryan Neal studied under for 6 years in Japan. And Kimura is one of Japan's most well-respected and really highly regarded bonsai artists. He's one of the guys that created the emphasis on the dead wood, really pulling out the sculpturality of dead wood in bonsai, and especially in junipers, which junipers have the most sculptural dead wood. There was some on the Shimpaku juniper forest at the start of this presentation. And so Kimura is who taught Ryan, and then Ryan is who taught me. So in a way, this tree belongs to the same school of bonsai that I've been studying under. And as you can see, again, with the geology, the topography, the almost extreme angle of the stones that are used to make this forest, it just makes it so much more captivating. It really grabs your attention and makes it more interesting. If you put these same trees in a flat, shallow container, it might not be as attention-grabbing. I mean, of course, it'd still be a beautiful tree, but the stones in this really help to just take this composition to the next level. And that's what Kimura really excels at, is taking everything he does in bonsai to the next level of artisanship, of intentional design and nuanced design.
Well,
yeah.
Can you say a word about the vegetation at the bottom?
Sure. So yeah, let's talk. Great question. Thank you. So in forest plantings, it's encouraged to have other vegetation as part of the forest floor, if you will. These could be little things like ferns, grasses, as you can see in the bottom left corner here, mosses, sometimes sedums. I think there's a little sedum at the right side above this lowest tree. So yeah, you can absolutely grow what you can inside your forests along the forest floor. I usually use moss in mine. I've got some weeds that are coming in here, but I need to pluck those and replace them with something a little bit more interesting. But yeah, forests are fun. It's one of the more fun bonsai types to work with. And so some of these pictures are a little bit blurry. I have to apologize for that. But I think this picture really shows you a forest planting in its winter dormancy, and how beautiful you can make these look in winter silhouette. Again, a long, low, shallow container, but you can see some topography is included as part of the forest floor on this, and you can see the trail through the woods technique is used on this one too, with the two distinct clumps. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you touch on why unglazed forests? Because some of these do look like they're glazed pots, but it could just be lighting or something.
So this is glazed, I think. Looks glazed to me because it's deciduous. You can generally put glazed pots, pair them with deciduous material because of one major characteristic, and that's a glazed pot emphasizes newness, and deciduous trees push new leaves every year, and they drop the old leaves in the fall. So generally with deciduous trees, the glazed container emphasizes the newness of the new leaves. However, you don't have to do it that way. You can put a deciduous tree in an unglazed container too, and it might look even better depending on the material you're working with and the container you're working with. So it's up to the eye of the artist to pair and make the best composition. Generally, unglazed containers are used for coniferous material because it emphasizes age.
So, Will, I have a question.
Sure.
From Carol. Does anyone know the age of the composition by Kimura?
No, I don't. I'm assuming this composition came together in the 70s. That's my guess. But I'm not sure. And I think it's some kind of a cypress. Ryan would know more than I would about this. So size of material. I mentioned that we have all these different sizes that we like to use for forests to emphasize the main trunks, and then the smaller tertiary, secondary, and tertiary trunks, and sort of background and periphery trees. You need a variety of trunk diameters. However, there are forests that use very similar trunks as well. Like there's been some famous forests that the the artist uses trunks of all the same size, and it sort of ends up looking like a grove of bamboo or like a forest that is extremely tight in terms of where trees are growing. So, just because you have trees of similar diameter doesn't mean you should not make a forest. You should try to work with what you have. However, a variety of trunk diameters is going to give you a more varied forest and help to build more depth into your forest composition. 2 or 3 primary trees are generally required, but like I said, it's okay to break the rules, especially if you're okay with if it fits the certain container you're putting it in, or if that's what you have. And then cultivate your trees. If you have some trees or have some trees of different materials or different diameters, cultivate them for about 1 or 2 years. You can use a grow box. You can plant them in the ground. You can get these trees going in a nursery style container or in the field condition, like this one. This one was grown in the field by, right here, Allen Hills grew this tree and trimmed it as a bonsai for about 30 years. Maybe it was 40 years. And it was growing in his yard. And he was trimming it and just cultivating it and building that trunk thickness and building the character and size of the tree. So cultivate your trees for a couple of years before you put them into the shallow container. Once you put them into the shallow container, the tree's growth will naturally become stunted and more dwarfed. So make sure the trees are sort of near the size you want before you put them into a container. Any questions so far? Okay, a couple more trees to talk through. Right here, you see this Japanese elm. I think this is a Japanese graybark elm. And you see a lot of these trees are similar sizes, but you can definitely see there's maybe 4 or 5 larger trunks, and then there's a multitude of smaller secondary and tertiary trees that really give this forest depth and give it that green umbrella and the green triangle of foliage planted in this low, shallow blue container. It's a really nice forest. I think this is maybe a Japanese forest. Above you see a coniferous forest. I see some dead wood in there in the main grove. And you see this is planted on a slab. I don't know if the slab is natural or if it's man-made. You can get both. In fact, there's some really great ceramicists that make slabs that you can't really even tell that it was made by a person. It's so naturalistic looking. So if you just let your fingers do the walking on your computer, you can really find some really cool ceramicists that are doing some amazing things to support these forest plantings. The forest on the bottom you see has again, nice use of the trail through the woods technique, separating the 2 clumps, but the clumps almost always join at the top if it's a singular canopy. There are multiple canopy forests, like this forest at the top, where you can see it's 2 differentiated canopies. This is another way to build negative space into your group planting. And those trunks look fairly similar in size at the top and on the bottom. So there's not a lot of variation, but there is some. You can definitely pick out which are the main primary trees. So typically forest plantings use an odd number of trees. This is to promote asymmetry. You can use an odd number of trees, but you don't always have to. Sometimes you'll plant an odd number of trees, and maybe one of those trees will die off, and you'll end up with an even number of trees in your forest. You just let this thing evolve. These forests are always evolving, they're growing. You're always responding to them. You're not really able to stay completely on top of them unless it's really the crunch time before the bonsai show, and then you'll get them all dialed in. But a couple weeks after that bonsai show, you're already seeing changes occur, and then you're back to responding. So odd numbers are used, like I said, because of asymmetry, but not to say that an effective forest can't be made with even numbers of trees. So these group plantings usually take a long time to prepare. Make sure that you're not letting your roots dry out while you're preparing the slab or while you're arranging the forest. Keep that spray bottle of water nearby so you're spraying your roots down, not letting your trees and roots dry out while you're positioning the forest. And even putting root masses in the soak tank to let the roots really soak during the positioning of the final arrangement is a good technique. Here we have a forest being prepared in the 1970s. I think this is by Master Suzuki in Japan, but I'm not exactly sure. You can see here they've got soil medium. The light-colored soil medium is the new bonsai soil that they're putting in. The dark colors you see are root balls with more of native soil as part of those trees. And you can see them working with wire to anchor each group of trees down to the slab. That slab is more than likely drilled with holes to both drain the slab and to allow anchor wires to come up through the slab and anchor this forest down to the slab. In bonsai, we use anchor wires to keep trees from blowing out of the pots or falling over and having some sort of catastrophe. So these trees are anchored in to the pots. Arrangement. So let's see. Yeah, so when I'm arranging a forest, I'm arranging it in units. And sometimes what you'll have is you'll have multiple trees growing together in a clump. And what I like to do is just use that clump in my forest. I'm not trying to break the trees apart and get everything all separated. If I have some trees that are single stems and other trees that are 2 or 3 trunk clumps, then I'm going to use that to make my forest look more natural. I'm going to use that to help promote asymmetry in my forests. Let's see. Secondary and tertiary unit, as we've been going through these pictures, we've been seeing that some forests have more of a primary set of trees and then a more secondary or tertiary set of trees. And sometimes, you could use three clumps of trees to promote asymmetry. Let's see. Typically, we put larger trees in the front of the forest, and we put smaller trees in the back and around the sides. That's kind of how you can go. Both these trees, this tree next to me is the exact opposite of that. The smallest tree is actually in the front, but this is a clump style. It's not necessarily a forest planting, but I think it does pull the viewer into the forest locale fairly easily. And then the tree on the side here, the Siberian elm, uses the primary tree on the very edge. It's not the best planting I've ever done. It's not the best forest I've ever done. It's okay. I want to plant some more tertiary, smaller trunked trees in the back, but that tree on the side here, that Siberian elm forest, just got repotted this year. It has gone through, I've had it for a long time. it went through a tremendous period of growth. It had a great, nice canopy on it. And then last year and this year, I noticed the tree starting to lose vigor. And this year I said, okay, I gotta change out the soil to get this tree the ingredients it needs to get vigorous and healthy again. So I'm expecting I repotted that tree, and I'm expecting it to make a nice comeback and really have the soil now to grow into and build the canopy up once again. So yeah.
In terms of maintenance, do you think it's easier to like maintain 6 trees individually until they're big enough to put into like a forest style, or would it be easier to just kind of grow it into a forest style and then groom it as it grows together?
I don't know. I think it's up to you. I think you could like build a grow box for those trees and put them all arrange them into a rough forest and grow them together in that box. However, if they're spaced closely, the interiors of the trees are going to start to lose light, and the branches are going to die back where the trees are pushed up against each other. So it depends on what you're going for. Sometimes that's actually okay, and to have some of that interior branches die back and really emphasize the height of the trunks. But if you want more even and more consistent branching that's healthier all the way around each tree, then I would space them apart further, or maybe even keep them in 1 or 2 gallon nursery containers. That way you can sort of control the amount of light that each tree is getting, which is going to help you build that foliar mass that's more consistent and maybe more branches with foliage from top to bottom. So I think it sort of depends on what you're going for, but yeah, I think. What else about arrangement? Any other questions about arrangement? I don't really like to read through all this stuff. You guys can read this. We've been talking about topography. In this photo, we see, I think this is maybe a larch. It might be some kind of a cedar, or might be a cypress, or some kind of a spruce. But you can see in here the artist placed stones in the forest floor. You can see there's also some little sedums and bushes mixed in with the moss to really give it that natural look, really give it that asymmetry. The tallest tree being right there on the right third of the composition. Using the trail through the woods technique, where we're spreading out our units and adding negative space. You can see this artist has done some significant wiring of the pads and developing. Oh. Okay, I don't think we have to obey that rule. I think we're good for another hour or so. Sorry about that. They were kicking the rest of the people out of the gardens, but I think we're good to stay. So, nice forest. I think nicely executed. Low, shallow container, unglazed. You see here, because the nature of the trees is coniferous. So, right here, Black Hill spruce. Okay. Then we have branch placement. So branches generally point outward, although it's not uncommon to see some interior branching. Generally, branches which grow inward are removed because of sightline conflicts, but not always. And when you're placing your branches in a forest, you kind of want to follow the bonsai branch placement thoughts, which are longest, lowest, near the bottom of the tree. A forest having a number 1 branch is okay. For this forest, my number 1 branch is right here, and it's helping to determine the flow of the forest to the right. Sorry, to the left. My right. Okay. More Kimura. Here we go. So let's talk vertical forests. And remember how I was talking about these ceramicists that are making these amazing rock sculptures? That they're a ceramic sculpture, but they look like a stone, and they're primarily developed to support a forest bonsai. Right here you have Master Kimura with two of his vertical forests. He really got into these after Ryan left. And Ryan went back there and saw all these vertical and all these crazy cool stone forests that Kimura had been working on since Ryan had left his apprenticeship. And I think this is just a great example of a forest that looks like a single tree. The stone actually looks like the trunk of the tree, and all the secondary trunks and branching is sort of part of the main unit. Really cool stuff. This is some really advanced forest planting, group planting work. These trees are planted in the cracks and crevices of the rock, and we use sphagnum moss and mixed with bonsai soil to make sure that those crevices are capable of supporting root growth. So you would water this tree, you would water this entire stone when you're watering the tree, because you want the water to be going all the way in all these crevices. Eventually, the trees at the top grow roots all the way down into the pot at the bottom. So once I put a forest together, I generally leave it out of direct sun for about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, and then I slowly bring it back into partial shade or partial sun, and I'm providing it with frequent waterings, because usually it's planted in a very shallow container. Usually it's in a very, like this one, the roots are very in a small space. That one is pretty shallow, so you tend to have to water forests maybe a little bit more than regular bonsai, depending on what kind of container they're in. What else? I think sunshine, once they're established, depending on what kind of forest it is, a lot of high sunlight is going to be desirable. And don't forget to rotate your forests. And once in a while, it's okay to rotate and show the other side to the sun for a week or two. And what I've noticed just sitting there next to Kathy at the start of the meeting is I've noticed that this thing is starting to, even though I want the tree to grow this way to the left, I see it starting to come this way, and I see everything starting to push sort of to the right, and I think that's a function of where this is located in my garden. I have a lot of shade trees on this side of it, and the sun is over here. So when I go to rewire this thing, I'm going to be trying to pull the tree back. And maybe what I'll do is over the next couple of weeks, I might turn this tree and let the dominant side face more of the sun. Yeah.
How old is that Clump Style right there?
Alan, you planted this. So Alan Hills planted this tree as a couple of sprouts. It was like maybe 5 or 6 sprouts in a 1-gallon nursery pot.
I've even been planting the seeds. Daryl Havener and I used to go collecting seeds from the canyon hackberries up Clear Creek and various areas like that. And that's what that is, seedlings of canyon hackberries.
So Alan doesn't have a mic, but he said that him and Daryl Havener used to go up Clear Creek Canyon or some of the canyons around Denver and collect the seeds of of the hackberries in those canyons, and they call them canyon hackberry. And Alan planted these seeds when do you think? Was it in the 60s or 70s?
It was probably in the 90s,
Oh, it was in the 90s?
yeah.
Okay. So he planted the...
Or late 80s or early 90s, I would guess.
So Alan grew this from seed. Grew it in a 1-gallon nursery pot, but had it in his backyard, in the ground. So this tree was growing roots out through the pot. By the time I dug, after a while, Alan said, "You know what, Will? I'm not really gonna do anything with this tree. If you like it, you can take it." So I planned a spring collect, and it took me about 45 minutes. Really, a lot of shovel work. To get this out of the ground because it had grown through the nursery pot into the soil, into the backyard. So got it out, and it took me 2 different repottings to get all of the old nursery pot out of the root ball. Like it, I had to cut this old nursery pot out of the root ball, and it didn't get it all the first time, and then went back in the second time with Todd, and we literally had to like surgically remove the remainder of the nursery container out of it because it was blocking some of the feeding mechanisms. It was blocking some of the water, and it was just a sheet of plastic in there. So we got it out, and it's been a good tree. It's healthy, and I had a little bit of loss. I lost this part this winter, so I'm growing this I'll probably cut these smaller things off and just grow this in to replace it. I noticed some other things with this tree where I think snow loads, or maybe, I haven't really touched this thing. I brought it here to show it to you guys. But I haven't really had time to work on it. So that's why it's in a little bit of rough shape right now, but it looks good.
Joe, I've got a question online
Yeah.
from Oscar. So is this plant in a forest or clump style? They just seem very close together.
Yep. This one in the Horst, this canyon hackberry, is a clump style. And great segue. So let's talk about clump and raft style forests. So this man, sorry the picture is so blurry, I couldn't find a really sharp picture of him. This is one of my senseis in Hawaii. I was fortunate enough to spend 2 years in Hawaii early on in my bonsai career. And during the times I was there, I was on the Big Island, and I sort of sought out the bonsai people on the Big Island of Hawaii. And one of them was David Fukumoto of Fuku Bonsai. And then I went to the Big Island Bonsai Association show during that time, and I met Hiroshi. And Hiroshi Akita sort of took me under his wing and taught me about tropical bonsai and the things he was doing with bougainvillea, and sort of helped shape me initially alongside of Harold Sasaki, who is my Colorado sensei. So you can see here, Hiroshi, I think, has looks like a cypress forest, and he won an award for this tree. You can see this tree really has a lot of angle of the trunks. It has that nice straight center trunk, but then it's like all the other trunks are at various degrees of tilt. So great way to show a clump style or raft style forest with this sort of tilt. I think this is less of a clump style. This is more of a standard forest, but using more of a clump style technique.
Why didn't you stay in Hawaii?
I wish I could. I was dating a girl from Hawaii at the time, so I would go out in the summers and stay with her and her family, and it was great. But you
You don't have to worry about any snow?
Yeah, it was so fun because I could go collect trees and just bring them back and just, they would just be growing. They never stopped. I could just collect tropical material and bring it back to the house. And it was like, it was a fun place to grow bonsai and to do bonsai at, because the material develops there so fast. Where, you know, here I wait years to develop trees to the size and shape that I want, but in Hawaii, you can just develop them within a year. Okay, so clump style forest. This is a good example of that. It uses sort of the same technique that we saw Hiroshi used in the forest planting in the previous slide, using sort of one sort of more formal trunk that's more straight up and down, and then sort of tilting out all the other trunks radially. Here's another interesting one. Sorry the picture's blurry, but this is what I would call a raft style forest. This uses you can see the main trunk of the tree, and the artist has grown the branches to look like a forest and multiple trunks of trees. And then here's the Canyon hackberry. I just wanted to place a slide and show you guys some of the development of this tree. This is the tree at the bonsai show. I think this was 2 years ago. And this is the tree when it was nicely styled. Like I said, I wasn't responding to it. I actually got proactive with the tree, and I was able to really wire it, style it that year, get it in the pot, do everything I could to get the tree show ready. Whereas now the tree is looking a little bit more rough than in this picture. So, you know, always respond. Like, I can get proactive for a while, but eventually I'm going to get to the point, especially when you have a lot of trees in your collection, that all you can do is respond to what the tree is doing. And, you know, I'm lucky if I can get this thing onto my workbench twice a year. So, that's bonsai. And, you can see this is another angle. This is what the photographer on the left side of this slide, the photographer, you know, couldn't even fit this tree in the frame of his camera, so he kind of took an angle of it from up here to really fit the thing in his frame. But I like this slide because it's just kind of two different angles of the tree and showing it as it was in a very refined state. And a show-ready state. The ceramic, okay, and Alan Hills, just giving him credit for growing this nice piece of material. And then the ceramic vessel is a Austrian ceramicist by the name of Horst Heinzelreiter. And Horst is a ceramics professor, and he really makes some really great bonsai pots that complement American bonsai, what we're doing here in America, very well, because his pots are sometimes a little bit rougher and a little bit more rustic, and that really complements our American Yamadori really nicely, because we have some very wild looking trees that have a lot of dead wood and are very old. Another blurry one, sorry, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but here you can see a clump style that has a couple of main trunks, it looks like. In fact, the two main trunks on this tree look very similar in size, but it's okay because they're both kind of offset by some smaller trunks. Let's move on to a little bit better of a picture. Another clump style forest. Deciduous in its dormancy period, and I really like this one with the ceramic body. Really sort of feels rustic, feels like a landscape, especially with the moss kind of coming over the edge of the pot. Nicely done. And then let's talk about the tree as a forest. So this is a technique where we take a singular tree and style it with multiple trunks. And this is my sensei Ryan did this one. I've personally worked on this tree. I cleaned the bark and lime sulfured the dead wood of this tree during one of my trips to Mirai. I've also helped Ryan repot it into this ceramic vessel. This is by Ron Lang, and Unglazed container. Ron uses a wash on his pots, and I think it's like a magnesium wash, or it's some kind of a wash where you get a nice sheen, and it's almost opalescent sheen on his unglazed pots. And you really need to see him in person to appreciate it, but you'll see some Ron Lang pots at the bonsai show, I'm sure, coming up here. So I'll be sure to point that sheen out to you. This multiple trunk tree, really, this tree is so wild, it's so old, and at some point you have to style a tree this old to look like a relic. And I think Ryan accomplished that in this design. This tree looks like an old relic. It looks like a giant sequoia redwood that's, 800 years old. And so this relic idea carries over into, this is the tree as a forest idea. So you can see here, Todd and I styled this relic Rocky Mountain juniper to almost be like two trees in one. This tree is very different. It's very sort of mind-bending when you look at it, because it has this apex off to the left side, and then it also has a kind of an apex in back behind that main deadwood spire that complements the entire right side of the tree. So we wanted to do something with this tree that emphasized the age of it. You can see most junipers, you take the bark off and show the live vein and show that red purple live vein. But for this tree, we thought we should leave the bark on because the bark is so chunky. It's hard to tell in this picture to really see the detail of the bark, but this tree is so old and has so much bark that we thought, let's just leave the bark and really help it emphasize the age of this tree. And also this tree has some interesting thick trunks as part of it, which is part of the Rocky Mountain juniper natural growth habit. Is Rocky Mountain junipers, if you see them in landscape or if you see them out in nature, they grow these big, thick, multiple trunks, almost like a candelabra. So the styling of a tree like this can't be normal. It has to be naturalistic, and that's kind of what we were going for with this. This picture really doesn't show the tree because you don't get the depth of the tree, but if you come to my garden for a tour and see this tree in person to really appreciate it. This tree is really cool if you see it in person. So no forest presentation is complete without a discussion of Goshen. Goshen is John Naka's creation. Goshen was made in 1963, and John Naka is known as the father of American bonsai. And he lived in Colorado for a time. He also lived in California, and Goshen is his sort of signature tree. And this tree currently resides in the U.S. National Bonsai Arboretum in Washington, D.C. This is kind of a blurry picture of it, but we see these magnificent trunks, so strong. The trunks are huge, and there is also some secondary trunks, but the power in this forest really comes from the three primary trunks that are placed near the front of the planting, of the arrangement. John emphasized dead wood with the tops of the trees, creating gin at almost the top of almost every tree. In fact, I think he did it every tree. And he also created some gin down some of the main trees. This is an early photograph of the picture, I think. This one is. This is really early. You can see all the trees have bark all the way up. The pads of foliage were just looks like more recently developed, not as old as in this photo. You can see how the pads have ramified and really added a lot of volume. And there's John right there.
Is this the one that's when you walk into the gate, right into that part of the garden, then it's sitting right there?
I think they move it around, but yeah, it's one of the main attractions to the U.S. National.
10 years ago, okay, I think.
You're lucky. Everybody in this room should go to the Washington, D.C. once in their life or more and go to the U.S. National Bonsai Arboretum. If you really love bonsai, you owe it to yourself. Go see it. So here you can see some development timeline of Goshen, 1968, 1969. Not much difference, but you can see the different. You can see there is a small difference, mostly in the quality of the photography. Here we have it in 1984. You can see the pads are more flat, whereas back here they were a little bit more angled. And then here we have it in 2005, much more dead wood. You see the dead wood becoming a primary feature of the tree. And then we see some pictures of John. I just wanted to include these in 2003 and a picture of him at the National Arboretum. Okay, a couple more pictures, and then I'm gonna get you guys out of here. I know this is getting a little long. This is a nice tree growing on a slab. The artist has used sphagnum moss to hold all the soil together, keep it from washing away. And this looks like a conifer forest, maybe a spruce, maybe it's a fir. But the artist uses the trail through the woods technique, although the trail is slightly obscured by the sedum at the bottom. And but a nice tree and a good example of the two distinct units of trunks, making two triangles. Let's talk a little bit about Penjing. I love Penjing. I want someday to have a Penjing tray like this. This is a marble tray, and Penjing actually they use when they the marble is supposed to be reminiscent of water. And even when you water the tree, it fills with water and actually has standing water on the marble. So really cool. Just love this. I think this is a famous Penjing. Penjing is a Chinese form of bonsai.
I was going to say, isn't that like some of the origination of bonsai, right? It's like
Yeah, bonsai came from Penjing. Yep. Penjing was the original form, and then the Japanese took Penjing and changed it and added some of their own technique and flavor and rules to it to become bonsai and what we know it as today. But ultimately, bonsai started as Penjing. And Penjing is currently practiced in China. It's on my bucket list to get there. Here's Ben Suzuki and his Ronin forest. This is another famous forest. I believe Ronin currently resides at the Pacific Bonsai Museum. Really, really cool tree. Multiple trunks, lots of trunks. Like, I think Ronin has 40, yeah, okay. 47 trunks. And a lot of the trunks are very similar in size and very tall. Another great tree, deciduous. This is an example of a deciduous tree that's planted in an unglazed container. You can see here the container matches the look of the trunks, the color of the trunks anyway. This is a tree that I think is also in the U.S. National Bonsai Arboretum. I think this is also a John Naka tree. It looks like it's the same type of material. It looks, and this one uses the trail through the woods technique. In fact, it even has a trail through the woods. Cool tree, very, very this reminds me of what I call a fantasy forest, or like more of a fantasy tree, like something you would see in a Lord of the Rings movie, or something you would see in a sci-fi movie. Love it.
Will?
Yep.
So where do you draw the line then with like Penjing or bonsai? Because I feel like this is, like Penjing is more landscape, right?
It can be.
So
Yeah.
with bonsai in particular, it seems like, certainly with the Japanese stuff, it's more suggestion than
Yeah.
it is literal as we would see with something like this, where I feel like more often than not, with the Chinese stuff, it's a lot more literal than it is suggestive.
I think you're right. So
You know, I mean, is there sort of a distinction then? Or is it just that it's a Japanese practice or a Chinese practice? Or?
I don't know enough about Penjing to really be an expert on it. So Dave is asking about sort of what is the difference between Penjing and bonsai. He mentioned Penjing seems to be more literal, whereas bonsai is a little bit more of a suggestion in terms of what you're looking at. I've noticed that Penjing trees can be almost, I don't want to say unrefined, but almost like brutal, almost like ugly. But in a good way. I mean, in a naturalistic way. It's to really understand Penjing, you have to really, I think, wrap your mind around nature and around the naturalistic style. Let's take a look. You can see this tree is I don't think they wire these trees. I think this is mostly clip and grow. You can see it's very naturalistic. It doesn't have the layers as much as you see in more traditional bonsai, Japanese bonsai. The impact is still absolutely the same. It's a phenomenal composition. You see the stones, the topography as a focal point in the composition. They cut those stones flat at the base so they lay flat on the marble surface. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that Penjing, that's for another presentation. I would need to learn more about Penjing. It's fascinating to me. The Bonsai Society does have a good book on Penjing, I think. I think we have a book in our library that's very it's like focused on Penjing, and I did check it out, and it's really cool. So take a look at that book. I'll have to find out what the name of it is, but we should actually check it out and go through it at one of our workshops. Very naturalistic style with this conifer. You can see it's almost a weeping style. Uses some gin, some deadwood gin at the top, and uses a nice naturalistic container with some nice moss at the bottom.
Well,
Yep.
on the previous slide,
Sure.
Is that a figure up there, or is that deadwood on the left? Second highest point.
I think that's deadwood.
I think it's deadwood.
It looks like it could be like a figurine or something, but no, that's probably deadwood. Generally, figurines are put in at the bottoms in like the forest floors if people want to use figurines. That Chinese Penjing had a horse figurine that was drinking from the water.
The point I was going to make is that the horse may be a better example, but it actually indicates a scale
Yeah.
of this particular composition. And I'm not an expert on the subject, but the Chinese, as I have heard, are very interested in demonstrating the strength of nature over any human accomplishments. And so
Yeah.
people are shown usually very small. That's why I thought that might be a figure up there. I couldn't see it clearly. But it makes this composition look like very old, very massive. And Japanese bonsai, more refined. You can see the human element in the composition and the control and the refinement and the branching and so on and so forth. Not so much in Penjing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I don't know if everybody heard that. I don't know if the people on the internet could hear it, but what he said is Chinese Penjing generally emphasizes the size and power of nature over that of humans. And so sometimes when you see in these Penjing plantings, you see these little figurines placed at the bottoms of them, and that's to emphasize the scale and how much bigger the tree is than the person. Cool. That's great remark. Some good, because I'm still trying to figure out Penjing. Last tree, another really nice deciduous tree. You can see it has a lot of movement up in the upper parts of the trunk. And you can see the branch placement, ramification. This thing has it all. It even has a container that sort of matches the color of the trunks. Really nice. So that's basically it. That's me. Any questions? Yeah.
So I have two. One is, how do you water or take care of a forest differently than an individual tree in a pot? Is it any different? And then the other,
Not really.
how do you manage the light so that you keep every tree healthy?
That's the tough question. I think that when you start getting into a point where the trunks are crowding each other, and how do you get light into the center, and how do you keep the trees balanced? I think that's a good question. All I can do is rotate this thing. You know.
Any defoliation?
Sure, you can. I think you can prune. You can prune things back. I've never defoliated a canyon hackberry. I think, Alan, you have, right? Do you defoliate hackberry?
No, I can't remember doing that, no.
Okay. But you can defoliate maples, and you can defoliate certain species of trees that could allow you to help develop the interior foliage. Generally in forests, the interiors kind of die out and kind of thin out, and you want the exteriors to have the majority of the foliage. That way you can see more of the trunks on the interiors. So, but it sort of depends. It depends on what you're going for. It depends on the size and shape of your forest. How far is it spread out? You know, how tight are we packing these trees? So, I think fertilizer, good sunlight, which we have plenty of in Colorado. We are blessed with high intense sunlight, the most intense sunlight possibly on the planet. Like, we are literally getting nuked here every day with sun, but it's so great for bonsai because it keeps our leaves small. It keeps our bonsai foliage at a scale that's great for bonsai, instead of letting everything get so big that it can in lower elevations. But yeah, I think pruning, I think rotation, and branch selection.
And you said watering's about the same?
Watering is pretty much the same as any bonsai. Generally, these long, low containers, they dry out pretty quick, but I'm sure you have bonsai in long, low containers as well. So, yeah, I think pretty much same water.
Tilt or anything?
You can, if you have a waterlogged environment. If you have, like, starting to get anaerobic, maybe it's not draining so well, put some tilt on it. Like, maybe put a brick under it or something to give that container some tilt. That's going to help get some air back into the system. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Talk for a minute about repotting. I can't imagine repotting a forest. It's like starting all over again.
Yeah, it's, yep.
What,
So,
special, how do you do that?
some people put forests on a steel mesh where it's like pretty significant steel mesh, and then they'll tie each tree into the steel mesh. But others drill the stone or have a pot that has anchor holes, and they will wire the trees in that way. It's not easy, so let's talk a little bit about that. I recently repotted this forest. This thing is in a natural stone that I hiked this uncomfortable lump of iron up a sand-covered mountain from where I found it. It was torturous, but I got it out. And the reason I got it was because it was so unique and it was so special. And there's no container that's ever going to be made by a person that can be this. And if you look closely, it even has a cave underneath it with like columns and stalactites and stuff in the little cave. It's unbelievable. So I saw it, I had to get it, and I had to make it into a forest. This does not have drainage holes. The only drainage in this forest is what naturally drains off the stone. Mostly it drains right off the front here. So I had to do some special things with this forest. This forest isn't anchor wired in. I can literally pick this up off the stone if I had to, and that is what I did for the repotting that I did. This stone has some fins inside of it that help to hold the trees into the stone. So the stone has some like rock fins that help to anchor it. But I didn't really want to drill the stone because I didn't want to break it. So this particular forest is a special anomaly where it's not anchored in. Now, when I repotted, so what happened with this forest is I used to have 2 trees in back that were smaller, and they kind of circled a little hidden spring. I had like a little indent back here that I like thought was my little spring in the forest. Those trees died. The tree started losing vigor, so I knew this year was the time to repot it. I was able to get in there with some bamboo chopsticks and loosen this thing up, and I was able to just pull this whole thing up. And I think Dave and maybe Evan, you guys helped me work it down, and Normando, I think you guys helped really work this root ball down, and we took a significant amount of soil and roots out of it and out of the bottom, and then we were able to put in new soil and place this thing back on where it was, and didn't seem to miss a beat.
So they maintained their relative position, each trunk together.
Yeah, these things all stayed in place. I was able to just bring everything out as a unit. Now, not every forest planting is going to be that easy. Especially if you did some serious structural work underneath with steel mesh or with multiple anchoring wires. But if you have multiple anchoring wires, you're going to go in the same way you went out, okay? So when you went out last time, when you put the forest together and you anchored it in, right? You had to do everything in a certain sequence. So in order to get it back out, you're going to cut those wires in likely the same sequence that you put them in. Or, sorry, in the reverse sequence that you put them in. So, if that makes sense. All these things are just a sum of parts put together in the correct order. So, to deconstruct a forest in a repotting situation, I think you're going to have to go at it with intention and focus, and you're going to have to figure out what you did last, and that's what you do first going back in, and that's what you're going to cut, and you're just going to work your way around. And even if you had to, locate anchor wires from the top, you could with chopsticks, and you could cut them from the top if you had to. There's always a way to repot a forest or to repot these plantings that are planted in stone even. You just have to go in a reverse order that you put it together at, I'd say. Any other questions? Yeah.
I've got one online, a couple, from Oscar. Is there a good store person to get some good forest planting pots in and around Denver or elsewhere?
Okay. So Todd Schlafer sells pots in Denver. Peter Karner Pottery. Peter is starting to get excited about making bonsai pots. And he does some typically more fine art pottery, but he is open to commissions and custom pieces. And you can look him up. It's Peter Karner, Karner. And he has his bonsai clay body dialed in now, and he's putting out some spectacular work right here in Denver's Rhino District, Arts District. So talk to Peter. Who else is putting together pottery? I don't know. Pottery is hard to find. It's hard to find some of the larger pots. I would say go to Ryan's website, bonsaimirai.com. He has the most
Expensive.
variety. No, he has the most variety. He has the most variety, and he's paying you're paying for the artist. You're paying for the ceramicist.
There's some cheaper
And
ones on Facebook auctions, I see.
sure, Facebook auctions. Ryan's prices they're up there, but you're helping these ceramicists make a living. So, and if you want those stones, those vertical stones, and some of the really cool custom-made ceramic stones, those are all on bonsaimirai.com.
He gets them from...
He gets them, so Ryan enters into agreements with the artists. So for Horst, Ryan is the authorized Horst Heinzelreiter U.S. retailer. Though no one else has Horst stuff, if you want to buy Horst pots in the U.S., you got to buy them through Ryan. So, and it's that way with a lot of the artists that he brings in, and it's curated ceramicists basically.
And then a comment from Terrell in New Mexico. Thanks, Will. Great presentation. Love the new venue. We needed this.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's so great to be in person, see all you guys again. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was kind of spitballing off the pot idea. Could the society have an agreement with the school that they could commission students to do pots for the society?
Larry has the Aurora Potters Guild.
It's actually bicentennial with the Aurora Ceramics Program. There's a group it's on Saturdays that I was going to tell you that would be one way to go to they make interesting pots and they do them by commission. But also one of our members, Bruce Murdoch, makes very interesting naturalistic pots that blend very well with some of our wild materials.
Well, Bill does too.
Yeah. Yep. Bill Sample does ceramics. Absolutely. Yeah. We can't forget our local artists. Bill Sample does some really cool ceramics. And you're doing custom commissions, Bill, or?
People ask.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Bill Sample, local Colorado artist. Yeah. I don't know. Pots are tough, especially sometimes at the sizes you need to put. If you want to put together one of these really large forests, it's going to take a really serious tray, or if you can go out and find a rock slab, great. If you can, but some of the larger forests are generally more impactful. But smaller forests are fun too. So they're fun to make. Go out and make forests. You guys are armed with information now. You have my email. If you have questions, send me an email. Come corner me at a bonsai meeting, and let me know if you have questions. They're fun and they're so popular. Everybody loves forests. It'll be like the #1 thing in your collection that people who aren't bonsai artists gravitate to. They always gravitate towards the forest. So definitely have one in your collection. I recommend it. Anything else, Dave?
How big is that tree of Ryan's, the forest? You said towers over you.
Oh, the pygmy cypress?
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably, I mean, God, it's huge. It's like, it's probably 6 feet tall from base to top. It's huge. And Ryan really does a lot of really huge compositions. And I think it's because, one, they bring more money. They're more valuable. Two, there's a lot of things to catch your interest in these larger plantings. There's so much that you can sort of just get lost in the planting. It takes you to the woods. I mean, when it's a bonsai or a forest planting that's that big, it's like a whole, it's literally a landscape in a container. So yeah, he sort of specializes in the macro scale plantings, and it's a sight to behold. Go out to St. Helens, Oregon, and go to Bonsai Mirai. You guys have 2 pieces of homework. Go to the Washington, D.C. National Arboretum, and go out to the West Coast and go see Bonsai Mirai and the Pacific Bonsai Museum. So, cool. Yep, road trip. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of information, and thanks for sitting through it.